Hello, good afternoon to everyone from Brussels and also from Bonn and Madrid, I think, with our speakers. We are delighted to have you here today to talk with us about recognition and the role of quality assurance when we assure the quality of our recognition procedures. My name is Tiia Laukkola. I'm the Director for Institutional Development at the EUA, and it is my pleasure to be facilitating this webinar today. With our colleagues, we've been working quite a lot on recognition, which is high on the agenda in the policy circles as well at the moment. The smooth recognition procedures are seen as a prerequisite for European mobility, whether it is for work purposes or for academic purposes and student mobility. At the moment, we are coordinating a project called Spotlight on Recognition, and this webinar is part of that project activities. We had already one webinar in January, setting the stage, discussing the framework for recognition, what is considered good practice in recognition, and in a general way. Now the idea is in this one is really go into the more detail. What is good practice in recognition, and when do we consider that recognition procedures are of good quality? So that's kind of the setting for today. I will have two speakers talking to me with me about this topic. Barbara Mischalk, head of section at HRK in Germany, where the section is called Higher Education in Germany and Europe. And then we have Adolfo Quiros, who is a professor at the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid in Spain. So two different systems showing us perhaps a little bit different challenges in terms of ensuring the quality of recognition. Some practicalities before I give the floor to our speakers. First of all, there are a few ways that you can interact with us. I see that some of you have already found the chat box that is on the right side of your screen. That is a place where to put greetings, raise any technical issues you have, or other remarks. Maybe you want to share some of your practices and put links in there or respond to your fellow participants. But we would ask you to put the questions to the speakers to the Q&A section, which is next to the chat. And there you will be able to also vote on the questions that others have posed. So please make your put in questions, because we're counting on getting many of them, and also vote. So we will see which ones are the most pertinent ones in your opinion. But then we also have some polls. We will be kind of picking your brain during this hour. And then finally, the fourth tab is the handouts. There we have collected some relevant documents and links for you if you want to get some further reading. For instance, there are links linked to the project that I just mentioned, Spotlight on Recognition. So you will find out how we are trying to give you further advice on how to develop your recognition procedures in your institution. So I think those are the key technicalities, but one more practical announcement, which you have heard always if you have been in EUA webinars. We are recording this session, and we will be putting it on our YouTube channel, where you will find it, or also anyone else can find it. So it's by going to the YouTube and seeking for European University Association YouTube channel. That's the way to access it. You will also get email up from us afterwards, where you will find all the links to the YouTube recording, to the presentations, and so on. So that is where I think I will stop talking about the practicalities, and I'll open the first poll. So we want to seek your views on the following issue. Would you say that you have quality assurance procedures in place at your institution for recognition procedures? Please submit your answer, and we will see when the responses stop coming. And I'm going to already, while we're waiting to close the poll, I'm going to reveal to you that next to the chat and Q&A tab, you find polls tab. If you go to that and then go to the closed ones, you will see the results once we have closed it. And I see that the responses have stopped now coming in. So colleagues, let's close the poll so that everyone can see the results. And I'm very happy with the results, because 59% of the participants are now telling us that you do have quality assurance procedures in place at your institution when it comes that deal with recognition procedures. This is a very good sign, and for those who think you don't have that or you're not quite sure, perhaps we can clarify things a little bit in the course of this session and maybe give you ideas what quality assurance is about. I'm going to now say one more thing before I give the floor to Barbara, which is that EUA has argued in our quality assurance reports many times that when we talk about internal quality assurance procedures, they are procedures that cover all aspects of planning, implementing, or checking how our procedures are like, and any activity that aims at improving the quality of an activity, such as a recognition procedure, that is considered to be internal quality assurance. So we've argued for a wide interpretation of quality assurance. But this is the point where I will stop with my introduction and give the floor to Barbara. And Barbara, in the standards and guidelines for quality assurance that both of us were co-authoring back in the day, there is an expectation for higher education institutions to assure the quality of their recognition procedures, to have quality assurance processes in place. And there's a standard 1.4 that sets out this expectation, and then the guidelines that are attached to it discusses the fact that it would be good practice to align your institutional recognition with Lisbon Recognition Convention, have a collaboration with quality assurance agencies and enigmatic centers, and so on. Can you perhaps elaborate on this and also touch upon how this happens in Germany? And for the participants, just for you to know, we might not have Barbara's image with us, but I think we should have her voice. Barbara. Can I hear you? Or have I lost you completely now? Looks like we cannot hear her either. So in that case, I think we're going to make a change of plans and start with our second speaker first. Adolfo. Great to see you. That I'm not all alone here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I will swap a little bit with you. We were planning to start with asking you that what are the challenges that you see in implementing recognition procedures in your Spanish university context. So yeah. I'll let you give us a hands-on experience first. while we see if we can have Barbara back.
Thank you, Tia. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I am here in the hard spot because I was counting on having Barbara speak before me, and I will make references to her presentation that have not been presented, but I hope it will do. As Tia said, although I have some experience at higher level, for example, in the Spanish National Quality Agency, having to do with recognition, today I want to speak from the point of view of a down-to-earth Erasmus coordinator. I am a mathematics professor. I tutor many Erasmus students, both outgoing and ingoing, and I just want to talk from that point of view. Okay. So there are many things we recognize. We typically recognize study periods in other universities, both abroad and also in our home countries. There are transfer students who want to change universities midway. I will not talk about that. And then there is the issue of full formal qualifications that have two aspects. One is your bachelor, master's, or doctoral degree recognized as such? But then there's the second issue of, is this recognized? Is this enough for admission to further studies? And also we have to keep in mind that although often we recognize studies done in other European universities, there are also students coming from third countries that want to be recognized. And this is a spoiler, because Barbara has in her presentation a sentence that says the result should be recognition, not rejection. I find this very appropriate, but one has to ask if the result should always be recognition. Of course not, because sometimes it's not, the data presented are not enough for recognition. But what I think we have to keep in mind is that although recognition should be always rigorous, it need not be rigid, okay? So what are our basic tools? Again, Barbara will identify five elements of good practice: quality, level, learning outcomes, workload, and profile. I will concentrate on three of them. Level, which in principle is given by the bachelor, master, doctorate, BMD. Learning outcomes, that I think should be publicized in a clear way by universities, so that when a third party wants to recognize your studies, they can see what your students have learned to do. And workload, which of course is measured in ECTS. And the question is whether ECTS and the BMD system solve the problem completely. And I'm afraid they do not solve it completely, although they are very good, very, very good and very useful tools. For example, the main problem for me is that although ECTS and BMD are sometimes thought of as an academic euro, and I agree with this, I think they're like euro coins, not euro banknotes, in the sense that we are using a common currency, but each country or even each university, each institution makes its own design. Okay, the euro banknotes are the same throughout the eurozone, but the coins are very different. For example, concerning the BMD level, there are changes in details. Most countries have 3-year bachelors and 2 years master, but some, for example, Spain, have 4-year bachelors. And there are other more extreme cases, like the French Grade École engineering schools, where you enter after 2 years of post-secondary work, and the program takes 3 years, and the question is this a master? And this is a difficulty for all types of recognition I have mentioned, both the study periods, full qualifications, whatever. And in particular in Spain, when Spain decided that we would have 4-year bachelor plus mostly 1-year master, we, at least in, I think, most Spanish universities, but certainly my university, we knew that this problem would arise. And to give details, just concentrating on study periods, say a first-year laurea magistrale student from Rome, so this is the first-year master, comes to my university. Do I allow him or her to take advanced bachelor courses? And more important in this case, will his university recognize them? Will his university recognize a 4th-year bachelor course as a first-year master course? Or reversely, if one of my 4th years grado, this is what we call bachelor in Spain, my 4th-year bachelor students from Autónoma goes to Rome, will they allow her to take master's courses? And will I recognize them? In this case, of course, the difficulty is mostly the first one. Will she be allowed to take master's courses? I will probably recognize them. In fact, in these examples, the answer to both questions is yes, when we exchange with Italian universities. But I must say that others are reluctant to this flexibility. So my advice is be flexible and take a global point of view. It's a bad practice to classify each course and each student in just one cell, in a unique level, and not to allow any mismatches. What I think is good practice is to ask yourself, would she or he be a bachelor or master student if she were at my university? Would it be adequate for her to take the course? What is her overall level of competence? Does this guarantee that she will be able to follow the course and profit from it? This is the kind of question you have to ask, I think, more than, is this in my university, strictly speaking, a bachelor or master level course? As for ECTS and workload, of course, we all know the basics. ECTS is typically 25 to 30 hours a week. One academic year is 60 ECTS with very few exceptions, and this makes 4 academic years of 1,500 to 1,800 hours of work. But here comes the problem of the ECT euro coins. This is arithmetical information, and there are different interpretations. For example, how many weeks do you have in your academic year? I think this varies widely. And also there is the problem that there are courses, I've seen all of these, of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I've never seen 11, 12 ECTS. How do you match them? Well, in fact, to me, this is not a big problem. ECTS provides a nice comparison tool, and I've never had any serious difficulty matching things. Maybe not one course to one course, but let's say a 9-year, 2 9-credit, 9 ECTS courses. Well, I will interpret that as 3, 6 ECTS courses, although maybe I have to fiddle around a little bit. This is not a big problem. One big problem, though, I have with ECTS is ECTS grades. The ECTS grading scale, the traditional ECTS grading scale, A, B, C, D, E, is quite imprecise. For example, the grading scale defines a B as being above the average standard, but with minor errors. And one problem is that in different countries, and even in different disciplines, so now mathematicians are quite strict in this, we have very different views of what a minor error means. Also, in many countries, we have traditional qualitative grading scales, not numerical. In Spain, we do. We have sobresaliente, notable, etc. And it's very tempting to equate those to A, B, C, D, E. And this may be a problem again. And last but not least, our knowledge of foreign grades, or for foreign grade systems, I should say, is often quite biased. For example, it's quite common that we say foreign students applying to doctoral school, but these are usually top students. And it's not so common that we see students coming from the bottom half of their classes. And for example, two examples of usual misconceptions, and I would say they are bad practice. One is to say that in Italy, everybody gets 29 or 30 out of 30. To consider that if you get 28 or 27, you are really, well, that's almost not a grade. A second misconception in the other direction is to consider that in France, grades are out of scale up to 20, and passing is a 10. In Spain, it's 10, and passing is a 5. So 16 out of 20 in France is like 8 out of 10 in Spain. That's easy arithmetic, and it's, again, very tempting. However, let's look at this picture taken from the 2015 ECTS Users Guide. These are examples for grade conversion. And not incidentally, the first line you can see here comes from the University of Paris. The second one comes from the University of Rome. And as you can see, although in France passing grades go from 10 to 20, and in Italy go from 18 to 30, which already is a difference. In France, you pass with half the grade. In Italy, you need 60%. If you see here, in France, 10 is very common. And anything above 15 is extremely rare. While in Italy, it's true that higher grades are much more common. The low grades are not the usual. But still, I can see a number of people below 29. Okay? So these are probably the people that will apply to doctoral school. But still, most people do not get a 29. Now, the point that the ECTS Users Guide tells you that each higher education institution should provide a statistical distribution table of the passing grades awarded in the program or field of study attended by the student. A grade distribution table, showing how the grading scale is actually used in that program. Notice it's a grading scale per program, not one for the whole university. A very bad practice is that I have very seldom seen such a grade distribution table. In fact, I believe my university does not provide it. I still see mostly ECTS grading scales, A, B, C, D, E. So to show you an example of good practice, I will give you an example taken from one of my Erasmus students from Autonoma going to the Politecnico di Milano. Okay, and this is the kind of report I get, which is very good. Here is the list of grades. You don't need to worry about this. Here are the Italian grades, 20, 30, 25, 23, 24. I will talk about this in a second. And these are the grades. Already here we see, the ECTS. Already here we see that in the same institution, there are courses with 5 ECTS, 7 ECTS, 8 ECTS, 10 ECTS. While my university, for example, insists that we use mostly 6. 3, 9 are allowed, 12, but multiples of 3. And this is not the case in Politecnico di Milano. Now, this is the usual grading information, course unit code, which I have deleted, the name, blah, 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 1 semester, 60 credits for the year. And what is this 3.3, 3.1? This corresponds to the last 3 lines, which you cannot see very well, but there are 3 different courses of studies. I think there are 2 laurea magistrali and 1 laurea, one in mathematics, here, information technology, mathematics. I cannot read it very well. But you see, for each of them, they tell me the sample size, how many grades there are, and the percentage distribution of all the passing grades from 18 to 30, and even 30 lode, which is an honor mark. Okay, and for example, I can see that the number of very high grades, say 29, 30, 30 lode, is very different among the 3 courses of study, the 3 fields of study. And therefore, with this information, I can really place the performance of this student within the course in the Politecnico di Milano. Learning outcomes is the third thing I want to talk. Barbara will mention in her presentation that a very good practice is to have a database of modules that were recognized. And the problem is that you cannot expect to find exactly what you have at home. It's really richer if you can do something different. And therefore, my advice is to look for similar learning outcomes rather than the same course descriptions. And I will just give a small example from mathematics at my university. Here is what we give the students for the University of Florence, the information. And here there are the subjects in Florence, the subjects in Autonoma, and you can see the name topology, which you cannot see in Florence. But we do recognize it because it's the content of geometry 2. They just call it something different. And even more, you can see here modeling. And you can see nothing like modeling here. This is a very particular course we have at my university. We are happy with it, but we cannot expect other universities to offer it. Well, there are things here with similar learning outcomes, and we do recognize them. We don't want to make our students miss 1 year because of this. So I'm at the end, just a summary based on my experience. Procedures and responsibilities for recognition should be clear. This is essential for quality assurance. Recognition is both an administrative and an academic matter. I don't think you can just consider it administration or the responsibility of a professor. Administrative experts should check that everything is fine and up to standards. And I think academic experts should make academic decisions because you need some expertise. A good practice, perhaps, is that academic Erasmus coordinators specialize in some countries, certain countries or institutions. And to sum it up completely, do not take a local view. Do not look for specific modules done exactly as in your university. Look at it globally. So again, citing Barbara, ask yourself if there are substantial differences between both universities and if these differences would jeopardize the successful continuation of the studies. And thank you for your attention. You have my email there in case you have any private question. Thank you, Tia.
Thank you, Adolf, for stepping in. And now you've taken some words out of Barbara's mouth, probably. But you made a remark in your in the final conclusions, that is, I think, of interest. The administrative experts and academic experts, so what do you think should be the division of labor between them? And actually, we did have I'm not going to let you comment yet. Let's see first what the participants say, how the recognition is organized in their institution. If I can get the second poll, let's see how it works in most of your universities. How do you do recognition procedures? Is it centralized or is it decentralized? And I need to answer myself as well and submit the answer. Then we go to the polls. And when I see that most of you have replied, I will close the poll. But let's see a few seconds still. And it gives a quite diverse picture at the moment. Still some answers coming in. So, okay. I think we have all the answers we are going to get. So, colleagues, if you can close the poll, and those of you who have clicked into the polls, now you can click on closed polls, and you should be able to see the results, which are quite inconclusive, I would say. 38% say that the recognition procedures are centralized in their institution, and another 38% says they are decentralized. While you suggest that administrative experts do one thing and academics do one thing, does it necessarily correlate with whether you organize it centrally or decentralized manner?
I do not think it does. In my university, the system is the following. We have a central international relations office. I think that's mostly, but I do not deal with them essentially. They do the contact with other universities and exchanges. Then we have an international relations office at each faculty, in my case, Faculty of Science, okay? And they take care of all the paperwork, and they do it very smoothly and very fine. And they talk to other universities. And then there are the Erasmus coordinators, who are always professors, okay? We take care of several students. And our task is to guarantee that their learning agreements are fine, that what they plan to take at the other university is consistent with what we do, whether it can be recognized or not, which, as I said, we mostly tend to be flexible and recognize things and try to find something they can do which is, in a vague sense, equivalent. Okay, this works very nicely. I must say the administrative staff at my faculty is excellent. Okay, and I have very good relations with them. Lately, we've learned to do everything through email, but it's okay.
Yeah. As we have
I do think it works.
Okay. Okay. I think there were quite a few things in the presentation that I see in the question and answer that you said some things that people might not completely agree with. So, but we'll get back to those. But the idea here is not that we should always agree on everything. I think this was very good practical case. You already said in the beginning of your presentation that there are different kinds of recognition. You know, you have the study abroad periods, you have full degrees, recognition of prior learning, and so on. And you chose to focus now on one. Does that mean that that is the one where you see that we have most challenges, or do you think that the other kinds of recognition are actually more challenging, and that's why you didn't want to pick them as a topic?
Well, I chose this one because I think it's by far the most common. It's the one we have to do most often. Therefore, I think it's the most interesting. But to me, the hardest is now I see people are asking, now that the recognition process of complete qualifications, at least within the European area, is more or less automatic, and therefore we do recognize bachelor and master doctorates from other countries with ease. The problem comes when you have to do this recognition for admission into further studies. This is quite complicated, okay? Because the structure and the contents of a bachelor degree are not the same. And in that sense, I would like to point out one thing that you have in the handout section, which is this, the European Chemistry Thematic Network has something they call the Chemistry Euro labels. And what they do, this is a group of academics, it came out of the tuning project, which some of you may know. And the chemists in the tuning project managed to agree on basic guidelines for what a bachelor in chemistry, a master in chemistry, a doctorate in chemistry should be. That's very helpful, because this is, to me, a very complicated issue. It's not as common as study abroad, and therefore I chose the other one. But this is, for me, perhaps the most complicated.
I would still pick one sentence from your presentation that I thought is crucial when we talk about, for instance, the recognition of full degrees, which is that the question that you also posed is that as a good practice, you have to ask yourself, will the student or the applicant be able to succeed in their studies? That should be the kind of the guiding principle when we think, do we recognize whatever it is? Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, so thank you, Adolfo, for giving us the very practical point of view on how to do recognition. This is something that people asked for in our January webinar. The feedback was that can we next time get something very tangible and an practical experience. So I think that was a very good one. We show that we are doing quality assurance in practice. We're trying to improve and take in the feedback. My colleague is probably putting the link to the first webinar, which I also already referred to in the beginning, to the chat box. But okay, let's take a step back in our program right now, and I will try again. Barbara, can you hear me?
Hello,
no.
Tia, I can hear you, and I'm very glad that I seem to be online at last, and I'm very sorry for the delay and for all the complications that issued.
Yes, but we can hear you, so yes.
That's great, and you will be able to see the slides also, so I think we can manage it.
Yes, okay, I'll give the floor to you.
Thanks, Tia. And welcome to everybody, and I'm glad to know you're out there. And you know that I'm out here as well, and so we can start with my presentation. I know that Adolfo already talked about some things I am going to mention right now, so I think I will cut some things short. For example, the types of recognition I wanted to explain at the beginning, that we have the 3 types of academic degrees, where we have a special office in Germany that is involved in cases of doubt or when an official certification is needed. We have the recognition of prior learning, which we are not talking about today because that would fill a whole series of other webinars that one might do at another time. And the recognition of periods of study, which is my and our focus for today. And I'd like to take you through the basics just very shortly for a moment. Let's have a glance at these most important documents for the topic, that is the LRC, for example, with the article stating that the responsibility to demonstrate that an application for recognition does not fulfill the requirements lies with the body undertaking the assessment and not with the applicant, which is a very important change, and that periods of study shall be recognized unless there are substantial differences. The other important document for our purposes, oh, sorry, that was too fast. Here we are with the ESG. The ESG, the European Standards and Guidelines for QA, that states that the institution should consistently apply predefined and published regulations, all phases of the student life cycle. Among them, recognition, and they refer to the Lisbon Recognition Convention also. So we have a framework across Europe, and now let's see what Germany has made of that. We have a legal framework for accreditation that is in 2 tiers. That is one interstate study accreditation treaty that organizes the states on the accreditation system and its organization. And we have a specimen decree that includes the criteria and procedures. But don't worry about these 2 documents. We are just looking into the specimen decree, which gives us the criteria. And they refer to the aim of recognition, which is mobility, as explained in the guidelines of ESG 1.4. That is, the students' progress in their studies is at the center here, saying in the decree, the study program creates a suitable framework to encourage student mobility, allowing students to attend other higher institutions without losing time. And like in the ESG, the rules given in the decree are supported also by guidelines, which are called the substantiation. And here we find the reference to the Lisbon Recognition Convention, in addition to the remarks on the design of the study program, that planning for mobility should be a part of it. Now that we have the rules on all levels, we have seen that the rules stipulate what has to be done, but they do not prescribe how to do it. This means that universities need to define their own procedures for recognition and to integrate them into their quality management system. And I have chosen the illustration of the different breeds of dogs for different purposes, instead of mechanized uniformity, to illustrate the point I want to make here. Now coming to the connections and the organization of QM and recognition. What should be elements of good practice? Generally, the regulations should be transparent and easily accessible for all. That is not only for the people who do the recognition, but also for those who apply for it. The responsibilities, processes, methodology, and assessment criteria are documented and accessible. The information on recognition and support are available, and the procedures are evaluated on a regular basis so that we can check if everything is really in working order. Secondly, how do we implement all these procedures? The process and the responsibilities should be binding and transparent. There should be a list of documents required for an application and all the templates and forms that are needed. And the crediting procedure should be fully documented. And most of all, refusals should be adequately justified. When we now look at 2 cases here for outgoing students, before they leave, they can prepare their stay abroad and maybe their return to their home university also. In any case, they should get enough information and advice on all the procedures, and it would be good to have learning agreements with them that lead to automatic recognition of their periods of study abroad and transcripts of records for all periods of study. When students are coming into a university who do not have learning agreements, this is more difficult, because then it comes into play that the substantial differences between the period of study at another university should be recognized compared to the other university. And as Adolfo already said, would these differences jeopardize the completion of the studies? And this leads to the 5 key words listed here: quality, level, learning outcomes, workload, and profile, which we're going to talk about in more detail later. Just a few examples for good practice. Example A is on transparency and reliability, meaning the university has established one transparent process for recognition, which includes information and templates on an online portal, and there are university-wide standards and guidelines for recognition. Example B is a database. Students can browse a database of modules or study programs and how they were recognized by the university in other cases. And C, there may be general and subject-specific frameworks within the university that a group develops with subject-specific sub-guidelines for use in the faculty, in the departments. All those elements, of course, do not work as standalones, but they need to be interconnected. Now let's come back to the keywords I mentioned before and have some food for thought about them. Looking at quality, level, learning outcomes, workload, and profile. And the first question is about the quality. Are the university and or the study program accredited by a reliable agency? So how do we detect degree mills or accreditation mills here? Is the period of study on the same level of the qualifications framework? So is it clear we're talking about a bachelor's or a master's module? Are the learning outcomes that are to be recognized comparable with regard to the requirement of further studies, which leads again to the question of success in the end? The workload, when we look at credits, they take second place to the learning outcomes, but they may be a supportive indicator if there are any substantial differences. And last but not least, the profile and the qualification objectives of study programs. Do they correlate? Do they fit together? And coming back to a question of Fernando's that I saw in the chat, these are the elements of good practice that are directly related to the so-called Bologna tools. Let's say the qualifications framework for the higher education area, the ECTS, the ECHA, the ESG, and of course the learning outcome orientation of the studies. So now, to make the link between quality management and recognition work, which needs to arise? What do we have as needs in the institutions? We have the need of expertise concerning the 5 keywords: quality, level, learning outcomes, workload, and profile. We have the need of distributed responsibilities, each to his own expertise, maybe on a central and decentral level. We have the need to keep in mind that the result should be recognition, not rejection, because thinking about mobility, that should be our aim. We have the need to include quality management at different points of the process, and we have the need for consistency in the application of the LRC and ESG. And I have added 2 more arrows just to show that there are more needs that may arise and that the list is never complete. Coming back to the overall objectives we should keep in mind. We should ensure mobility, and we should ensure the successful completion of studies. And this can be done in a way that the universities have to develop on their own. It's their own autonomous decision. If we look at the LRC and the ESG as a kind of sandwich with universities as the filling in the middle, we have frameworks that are essentially the same. But we have the way to do it as, so to speak, the filling of the sandwich, which can be rather different. Lots of different things that can be filled in here. The main thing is the product is reliable recognition. And last but not least, I'd like to mention that the objective of recognition is mobility across and beyond Europe. And this enhances the education experience, because intercultural experiences, improved language skills, social interaction, and experiences with a different university and a different university system, well, they really cannot be quantified in credits, but they are at least equally important. And I think we should keep that in mind, and I thank you for your attention. And questions and comments are welcome now or later. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. That was very good overview. So for those of you who joined us in the middle of the session, this was supposed to be the introductory presentation and then go to the practicalities, but we like to improvise and do things also a little bit differently. The question I would have right now for you, Barbara, is that how do you see that the external quality assurance and external quality assurance agencies in Germany would have incorporated in their processes this expectation that institutions need to look into the quality of their recognition procedures? Has this led to any changes in the external quality assurance?
The regulation I showed you earlier, this paragraph on the mobility should be ensured by the Lisbon Recognition Convention, and its application is part of the universities. So it's a criteria the agencies address either in the program review or in the institutional review, which is called system accreditation in Germany. So they are looking at this paragraph very closely, and the universities first of all, know that, and on the other hand, need of such a kind of processes themselves.
Okay, we're hearing bleep every now and then, but I hope the participants can hear, at least I could hear what you were saying, so it is part of the external quality assurance as a result as well. Okay, yeah. Thank you. Now I think we can take away the slide, and Adolfo can perhaps also activate his camera. I would now have a conversation between both of you. So first of all, Adolfo, you touched upon a couple of things that we have now questions about, which is, first of all, the grading scales seem to be quite, let's say, a little bit of a controversial as well. Should we use them or not? Any quick reaction from your side?
Yes, I've seen in the comments that people say that the grading scale should not be used anymore because it's not in this. I told you, I showed it since 2015. We are supposed to have these grade distribution tables. But what I want to notice is that I do several recognitions each year, and I very rarely see this grade distribution. I very rarely see what I get from Politecnico di Milano. Okay, so I know it's outdated. It should ABCD should no longer be used, but my experience tells me that it's still what is being used. Somebody, I forgot the name, mentioned that if we all use the grade distribution system, we could feed that into our computers and do the translation of grades automatically. I'm not, even although I'm a mathematician, I'm not quite sure about that. And there is a second aspect related to ECTS I would like to mention. Somebody from Ireland said that certainly the time counting for an ECTS is optimistic. I agree. I agree. And that's one of the things I mentioned about the coins. How many weeks do you have in your academic year? If we use the 1,500 hours for 1 year, and in Spain, I use for workload for a week what public servants are supposed to do, 37.5, then that would mean a 40-week academic year. And that is certainly not the case. Okay, so I agree with our Irish colleague, probably they are doing a lot less. What I said is that the fact that I do get the transcripts with an accounting done in ECTS simplifies my life a lot with respect to the previous system where you would just get the name of a course with no indication of length. ECTS at least tells me what part of an academic year this course in particular has taken. And then I can make some equation. Okay.
Yeah, so it's not about hours; it's more the in a way the percentage or
correct.
Yeah,
That's the idea.
Proportional time it takes. Barbara, would you have any comments on this, let's say, workload or the grading? You said already in your presentation that learning outcomes actually kind of outweighs the workload.
Yes, in general, they do. But on the other hand, if you compare a learning outcome that has been achieved with a credit load of 10 ECTS, there should be differences in depth to one that has been achieved with 5 ECTS, for example. So if there are huge differences, you have to have a closer look at not only at the overall learning outcome, but also at the documentation that is available for this period of study. So this is a major point. The grading scales and the grade distribution. Well, I'm lucky to say that in most German universities, there is a grade distribution that can be given with that is the percentages that can be given with the final documentation to a bachelor's or a master's diploma. But there are some difficulties when the cohorts, so to speak, are rather small. We have a lot of programs that have an intake of only 30 students per year, and then the statistics are not that reliable as in programs that take in maybe 800 per year. But those are special cases, but in general, grade distribution is a good solution for that.
Okay, then I'm going to take the question that is the most voted and which really makes the link between the quality assurance and recognition procedures. Aurelia, who already mentioned in the chat in the beginning that there is a publication by a LIRECA project which talks about how to make the links between these two, is asking what indicators would you recommend to monitor that recognition is done at a higher education institution in line with the Lisbon Recognition Convention. EUA was part of LIRECA project, and maybe this shows that we have some common thinking with Aurelia, because this was my backup question as well. That's why I'm taking it first. Barbara, what kind of indicators would you use?
I think it's very difficult to find any quantitative indicators here, like the turnabout time or the number of applications that have a positive or negative decision, because those already depend on the applications, and the universities do not have any influence on what is handed into them. But I think it might be a good idea to look at the communication to the applicants. With and to the applicants. Is this reliable? Does it work on a regular basis so that the applicant receives information about the processing of the recognition on a regular basis? And if there are decisions this way or that, are they really justified? Is there a good reason given for that? And last but not least, are there procedures for complaints and appeals for the applicant, so the thing can be given to another party to check again?
Yeah, definitely. If there are a lot of complaints or appeals, that would be an indication of something, at least that the communication has not worked. Adolfo, do you have any ideas for indicators?
Yeah, yes, I have a comment. It's maybe previous to the mobility. I do think that the learning agreements are the key. Okay. We should, if we have an agreement with another institution, it should be possible to write a learning agreement where the student, where most things can be recognized, provided the student passes the course, of course. I dislike it very much, and it's a problem sometimes in some topics at my university when students say, no, I do not want to go for an Erasmus because I will basically lose a year because there is nothing that will be recognized. I've heard this, and it's very disappointing. So I would go for learning agreements, and I would say, all students in the mobility program should get a learning agreement with at least 80% of the credits recognized. And most should, in fact, get 100%. And that's, I'm a mathematician, that's a quantitative issue. But if you systematically do not find courses at the other institution that can be recognized as yours, maybe you should not have an agreement with them.
Well, that is true. You should reconsider whether this is a right fit.
Yeah, but there is the pressure sometimes to have lots of mobility agreements, and then there are troubles. I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, but in a way, with the way you were framing the learning agreement, one would argue that that's a quality assurance measure for your mobility.
Yeah. That's my point of view.
Yeah, this is something that we actually, with the indicators and how to assess if you are doing a good job in line with the Lisbon Recognition Convention, is something that we are going to come back to in the next stages of our project, where we are looking into developing a self-assessment methodology for institutions so that they could try to benchmark themselves against the Lisbon Recognition Convention. So for those who are interested in these issues, please keep your eyes and ears open with regards to our communications in the next stage. I will take in one more question, and this goes a little bit back to the ECTS grades and levels. We have a question about what to do when the other institution doesn't use these or doesn't provide information about these things. How do you then recognize the students' performance? Adolfo?
If I have no information, I use arithmetic. I'm sorry, but that's the best I can do. I assume the grades are equally distributed, and I do a rule of 3. Sometimes, if it's a country I know reasonably well, I use my experience. But if I have no information, the best information I have is mathematics. This is a very poor answer, I understand. And this just goes to the importance of providing some information, at least the ABCD thing. But otherwise, I cannot do better than just use basic arithmetic.
But this shows the importance that when we do have pan-European commitments like using the ECTS, it is important that everybody uses it so that we can kind of transfer and we can be transparent. Any final advice from your side, Barbara?
My final advice is cooperation. We know that a number of universities in Germany cooperate on recognition procedures, that they have their own databases and make them available to the partners and to the colleagues to exchange information. And another thing that I would like to mention, and this is a bit also for HRK important, it's a new project we have, the Modus project, which will work on a database for recognition within Germany. So there is a tool in future that the universities can use for supporting what they do. But on the whole, I think cooperation and exchange of information might be the first step to have more consistency in recognition across one system at least.
Yes, I think this is what we are also trying to do, is to create a community that then can discuss these matters. For instance, in our LinkedIn channel, there is a possibility for anyone to start conversations. I know we are running out of time, but I will take one question from Fernando Galan. Adolfo, from your perspective, doing this in practice, have the Bologna tools helped to speed and smooth the recognition procedures?
Very much. As I already said, ECTS gives you some measuring tool for the size of the course. And most important, I think that Bologna has guided most universities into publishing learning guides, course contents, learning outcomes that you can consult. I can consult for recognition, and students can consult before they register. Okay, so you no longer have to rely on the name of the subject, which was the traditional thing. Okay, I think they have been really very, very helpful. Besides the bachelor, master, doctorate, which I think is the weakest part of the whole system, honestly, although it's the key. But there are really big differences in the interpretation of this. Okay, but still, it's also useful.
Barbara, is the glass half full or half empty after 20 years of Bologna process?
I'd say it's 3/4 full.
Good.
Because when you look at the situation 20 years ago and the changes we have had over the years, I think we have gone many big steps ahead. So definitely fuller than half.
So it's the final stretch that we still have to go through, so to make these things work. And in this regard, the implementation of these Bologna tools is indeed important, that we all implement them so that we can understand each other's systems and the courses and what the students have learned. And I still repeat what was said earlier, that the important thing is that we recognize when we can, and we keep in mind the question that, well, will the student be able to succeed in their studies in the next stages? That should be the guiding question. If they are, let's try to recognize. As I've hinted in previously, the discussion on these issues will continue, and there will be more updates on EUA activities and our partners' activities, because it has to be said that Adolfo is here on behalf of CRUE, the Spanish Rectors Conference, and Barbara on behalf of the German Rectors Conference, and they are both our partners in this project on the Spotlight on recognition. And the partnership will continue to bring out more roll out more activities in autumn. So follow us. And before that, there are still EUA webinars coming up, and on slightly related issues. And then also I would highlight that as part of this project, the Stream online training platform is open at the moment. So if you are interested in really getting a training on recognition matters, please have a look at that one, because it is a lot of exciting materials there, and it is for free, which has to be said. So let's be in touch. Thank you, everyone, and especially Barbara and Adolfo for being good sports despite of the little bit of a technical glitches that we had. So, and all I can say now is have a nice afternoon, and we'll be in touch. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. It was a pleasure.